Ali Madad. We start today with a series of conversations to highlight and commemorate Mediation Awareness Week. I hope that during this week, you will join me on a journey to explore mediation processes and principles we apply in which we, in the Conciliation and Arbitration boards, are adapting to these challenging times to better serve the Jamat. The theme of this year's Mediation Awareness Week is justice and equity during and post-pandemic. We start the series with setting the foundation that has guided us during our 1400-year history, rooted in our faith to the changing times with the guidance of our imams. The Conciliation and Arbitration boards, established by Maulana Hazar Imam when he promulgated the Ismaili Constitution in 1986, are the current institutional iteration of that long history of guidance. I am really pleased this evening to have a conversation with my colleague on ICAB, Ali Lakhani, who has deep knowledge and expertise in this area. Ali is a lawyer, trained at Cambridge, and has been practicing law for over 40 years. Ali founded and edits the publication The Sacred Web, and is an author of several books and publications, including Faith and Ethics, the publication of the IIS in 2018 as part of the Diamond Jubilee commemoration. In 2001, Ali won the first prize for the paper he presented on Hazrat Ali's conception of justice and government at the conference on Imam Ali in Iran. Ali has served in various roles on the Conciliation and Arbitration boards, practically since the establishment of the CAB system. His contribution on ICAB is invaluable. He has taken the lead in developing the ethics training program for the CAB system. Welcome, Ali.
Hello, Zuli, and hello, audience.
Thanks. Let's start from the very beginning. What do we mean by the term ethics?
Well, the term ethics is used interchangeably with the term morals, but there is a difference. Whereas morals, like laws, denote rules, ethics denotes an ethos. An ethos is a whole way of looking at the world. And the ethos in this case is the ethos of unity and interconnectedness. This can be expressed in faith terms within Islam by the concept of Tawheed. But Maulana Hazar Imam also speaks of this in non-faith terms by the use of the term cosmopolitanism. So what is being denoted here is the underlying idea that we're living in an interconnected world as one. The best definition that I often quote about ethics is the one by Maulana Hazar Imam, where he says, ethics is a bridge between din and dunya. It's a way of bringing our faith into the world. The key ideas here with respect to ethics, the key idea is harmony. The notion of unity and interconnectedness is the harmonizing principle, and ethics then is the harmonizing instrument. And Zuli, you will know this, that at the end of the Diamond Jubilee, in a private conversation with a group of ICAB people, where Maulana Hazar Imam was saying that we must educate the Jamat to resolve the disputes amicably, in response to a question or comment I made to Maulana Hazar Imam that what they don't teach is the principles, Maulana Hazar Imam said, it all comes down to love. So ethics really are a way of bringing love into the world of action.
That's really powerful. And help us understand what is the importance of ethics when we talk about mediation and conflict resolution?
From the point of view of CAB, there are two ways in which the notion of ethics is central. It's central to dispute prevention and central to dispute resolution. Simply put, in the case of dispute prevention, if people are more ethically literate and they have an ethical sensibility with an ethical commitment, we would experience a reduction in disputes. Conflicts lessen as ethics increase. From the point of view of dispute resolution, if there is an ethical buy-in, once people have disputes and they come before CAB, that is conducive to an ethical mediation process. So we can have ethical processes of respectful dialogue, we can have ethical outcomes focused on fair outcomes and honoring agreements.
And how does the CAB system practically implement these concepts of ethics in mediation? It seems very esoteric in some ways. How do we practically do that work?
Well, the practicality can be summarized in a formula that we use within CAB for training purposes. Then the formula is niyat, adab, and amanat. Right intentions, right behavior, and right outcomes. And so in our CAB training, what we focus on is getting an ethical buy-in at the beginning of the process. And it starts with a commitment to the right attitude. So when I say the right attitude, we speak of the ethic of harmony, the ethic of integrity. The ethic of harmony meaning that people will regard each other not as enemies, as adversaries, as opponents, but as brothers and sisters. The ethic of integrity is the idea of being truthful and transparent, avoiding legalistic maneuvering, for example, but being bringing an attitude where one wants to be fair and achieve the right outcomes. In terms of adab, or ethical behavior, there are several specific ethics that we teach, and we try to get this commitment from the parties at the beginning. The first is the ethic of dignity, that they should be respectful towards each other, that they should act with decency towards each other. Next is the ethic of empathy. They should try to place themselves in the other person's shoes. They should listen to the other person's point of view and engage with them with a sense of respect. Then there is the ethic of fair dialogue, acting fairly, avoiding undue influence, avoiding judgmentalism, being responsive rather than reactionary. Then a key item, the ethic of collaboration, because, of course, as you know, Zuli, in mediations, we're not imposing solutions on the parties. They have to come up with their own agreement. And so the ethic of collaboration is key. They should try and work as a team with a spirit of compromise, a spirit of give and take, so that they can reach the outcomes that are necessary. And finally, the ethic of moral reasoning, because whatever point of view they want to present as being fair should be morally justified. They should be able to not just state positions, but positions that are based on principles. So that is the whole area of adab. And finally, the concept of amana, fulfilling one's trust, is focused on ethical outcomes. And there, the focus is on two types of ethic, the ethic of equity and the ethic of healing. The ethic of equity being focused on looking to the common good rather than pure self-interest. It's natural when one wants something just to look at one's own interest, but here the focus is on the common good. And finally, from CAB's point of view, the ethic of healing is key. Maulana Hazrimam has spoken about the importance of bandaging the wound. So not only dealing with the surface issue that people have come to CAB with, but to try to heal the underlying relationships, viewing forgiveness as an act of enlightened self-interest, and principled reconciliation based on the idea that it goes with truth, hence the phrase truth and reconciliation.
It's very, very helpful. And, people come to us at a particularly fragile or difficult time in their lives. What are some of the challenges we encounter, and how are they addressed in the context of a mediation?
That's a very good question. In practical terms, when people come to CAB with their disputes, they come with formed ethical landscapes. They don't come as blank slates, as tabula rasa. They come with, for example, value biases. Let's take the example of how women are viewed in certain situations. Women are devalued, and that affects, for example, in the case of marital disputes where CAB is asked to make fair provision or to negotiate or help the parties negotiate fair provision, a value bias which devalues women will create an unfairness towards the wife. Sometimes, for example, there are cultural barriers where women, for example, are not seen as worthy of the right to inherit. And there might be issues that have to be sorted out with that sort of a bias that is a blockage. Another form of ethical blockage would be power imbalances, where there's undue influence or extortion or bullying. A couple of examples there, where somebody is dealing with a claim that is a sound moral claim, but cannot be enforced in court because a statute of limitation blocks that avenue. The party who has the legalistic advantage may decide that they're not going to play ball in terms of doing what is fair. Another example would be where, say, a couple gets married in a third world country and move to another country, have differences. The husband is the breadwinner and decides to leave his wife stranded in the other country. That creates a power imbalance, and CAB tries to be aware of these kinds of situations so that those kinds of ethical blockages are addressed. Further examples are where you have threatened egos. The litany of things like, jealousy or people trying to seek revenge for perceived slights, or the catalogue of the 7 deadly sins, greed and lust and all these kinds of ego-driven barriers are barriers to achieving ethical outcomes. Sometimes there's mistrust, not keeping one's word in a contract situation, or acts of dishonesty, cheating, infidelity. And sometimes it's, there are cases of illegality, fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, situations like that pose special problems for CAB because CAB will not condone any of those kinds of acts. So these are some of the challenges that we face. In all of these areas, the key for CAB is to try to anticipate them through our training programs. And CAB trains its personnel in these areas. So, for example, in determining how to seek an ethical buy-in from the parties without the mediator violating their neutrality through the process. Because after all, the mediator does not make a decision for the parties and has to remain neutral but facilitate the parties acting fairly. So how do we secure an ethical buy-in in that sort of a situation without violating neutrality? How does one build trust between the parties? How can one help identify and address ethical blockages? I've spoken of some examples, but CAB personnel have to be trained in that regard. how to ferret out the truth in cases where it's being concealed. A typical example would be where in a matrimonial dispute, usually the husband will come to the wife and will say, I don't have more assets than I'm showing you at the moment. Whereas it's well known that, the husband has many more assets than he's actually putting on the table. So the question of hidden assets, that is addressed through reality testing, for example. How to encourage a culture of collaboration between the parties. I mentioned the ethic of collaboration as being key. How to address power imbalances between the parties, third-party interference, how to firewall against that kind of interference in a fair mediation, and how to foster fairness without imposing solutions on the parties. These are some of the key challenges that we face. There's also, I think it's important to view CAB's role in all of this in a broader context. And CAB is not in the business of changing people's ethics. Ethical enculturation has to start at a very early age. And Maulana Hazimam has given us guidance on this, saying that it should start from pre-kindergarten, at a very, very early age. Concepts like honesty, caring, trustworthiness, these sorts of things are core concepts, and they need to be inculcated from a very young age. I know, Zuli, later in the week you have one segment on the Small Mediators program in Portugal. And it will be useful for the audience to keep this aspect in mind. How do we train younger people, especially, to be promoting this sort of an ethical culture? When people come to CAB with a problem, there is what's known as the iceberg analogy. The iceberg analogy being that one only sees the surface. There is a huge mass below the surface, which is not readily apparent. And CAB personnel have to be trained not only to look at the surface issue, but the underlying issue. So, for example, if there is mistrust in a marriage due to one party's infidelity, there may be a deeper underlying cause, perhaps a lack of proper attention by one spouse to another that has created the problem. If in a business there is a dispute of some kind, it could be something as hidden as somebody taking offense over, one of the partners taking offense over a comment that the other business partner has made that has now soured their business relationship. And some of the issues are systemic. So, for example, in the case of parties to a marriage, it may be that they entered into the marriage without a proper understanding of the commitments. Or in a marriage, they failed to discuss ahead of time and reach some sort of an understanding on issues such as how they would deal with money, children, in-laws, cultural differences, religious views, these sorts of things. For all of these kinds of things, with a little bit of thoughtfulness, foresight, and planning, many of these issues can be anticipated and dealt with. In a business context, Haj Imam has often mentioned how important it is to memorialize a deal. This is something, in fact, that is encouraged in the Holy Quran. There is the issue of failing to plan for the future of a business, how to accommodate the next generation when they enter into a business, how to deal with wealth transfers in that sort of a situation, how to consider exit strategies, as Haj Imam has often said, And there are, from a legal point of view, there are a variety of ways to plan for this, shotgun clauses, rights of first refusal, things like that. Again, with a bit of forethought, we can prevent disputes by understanding what the causes are for the cases that come before us. And so there is an analysis done by CAB of root causes. And then that is played back to our sister institutions. The Economic and Planning Board, ITREB, Social and Welfare Board, the Mukikamrias, for example. And this is so in other words, CAB does not function in isolation. Its work, especially in the field of ethics, has to be a joint effort, not only with other institutions, but with the Jamat themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ali. That was very, very helpful. And I hope that this particular session has given you a sense that CAB, the services CAB provides, is much more than the mediation service X, Y, and Z that you would get from an external agency if you went down that pathway. It's a holistic view. It's looking at individuals in the Jamat through that lens of a whole sense of their lives and not just the dispute that's in front of that. So that has really been a very, very useful starting point for our conversations for the rest of the week. I hope that the Jamat will continue to join us as we explore other areas. Tomorrow, we will in fact start off exactly that with the young people and the initiatives that the CAB system has taken to be able to start from a very young age to inculcate the sense of ethics and values in the work that happens in the whole process of growing up to be ethical men and women and murids of the Imam. So I hope that you will join us as we continue on with this dialogue. Thank you very much, Ali, for this very informative foundational piece that helps us to talk about the rest of the week of Mediation Awareness Week. For those of you that are interested in services that the CAB can provide, please click on to the link below, and then that will guide you to the National Conciliation and Arbitration Boards in your jurisdiction. And do join me tomorrow as we talk about the young in our Jamat and we hear their voices. Thank you very much. Yali Madat and Kuda Hafiz.